Welcome to 100 Units. So excited to have Drew on here from Valbridge. He is a excellent appraisal, over a decade of experience. We've done a ton of deals together. So I had him on just so he can share his insights from an expert appraiser here in the Central Florida market. Drew, great to have you on.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Joe. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Would you mind giving a quick introduction of yourself and your company?
Sure. So my name is Drew Hahn. I'm a managing director at the Valbridge Orlando office. Valbridge is a national firm. We have 80 offices across the country. We service anywhere from California to New York to Florida. So we cover a very large geographical area. I primarily work in income producing assets, a lot of apartments, shopping centers, self-storage facilities. So that's my main area of practice. I've been appraising for almost 20 years, and apartments are probably one of my more favorite asset types, particularly ones that all have the same floor plan. They make my life a lot easier. But yeah, that's just a quick rundown of my company and myself.
I apologize. I undercut you. I gave you only a decade, and I thought it's two
Yeah, I think
decades
we've
of
been working
experience. And
together for
you
about a
look so
decade.
young. I didn't think it could be 2 decades.
Well, I think probably one of the first deals we worked on was about 10 years ago. And
Probably.
we probably just slowly kind of got to know each other since then.
Yeah,
So it's probably why it feels like a decade, but time flies.
man. Well, right off the bat, I'm going to get
Yep.
your insights. Our entire space is multifamily owners. Obviously, they're looking over and over to maximize their proceeds, maximize the value of their property.
hmm
Give us a couple of quick tips of what you've seen the best in the business do to make sure their property hits the max value.
So the deals that I come across a lot of, what I see is contract rents just not keeping up with market. Orlando has been really hot for multifamily, as you know. I mean, rents have been going up 15-20% a year, if not more. Um, and I think a lot of landlords, they get comfortable and they just don't raise the rents. And you get a big spread between where market rent and contract rent is. And so just keeping up with market rent is very important. Um, Another thing I would say is to check your expenses and bid it out. Make sure you're getting the best price for your expenses. Landscaping, pest control, insurance is a big issue right now. If you think your taxes are too high, appeal them. But all that comes to your bottom line, as opposed to say a shopping center where the leases are on a triple net basis. If my taxes go up $1 a square foot, I pass that through to the tenants, and my NOI doesn't get changed very much, if at all. Multifamily is different. I pay the expenses as the landlord, so all that hurts your bottom line. So just keep your rents to market and keep your expenses as low as possible. Fill whatever vacancies you have, and that's the way you would maximize the value of the property.
That is words of wisdom and words that every multifamily owner operator should be living by every day. You are right on.
Yeah.
Give us a quick synopsis of a lender appraisal, like how the process starts and how it goes, from start to finish.
I can't really speak to the whole loan process. By the time it gets to the appraiser, a lot of that's already done. We're kind of the tail end of the loan process. But by the time it gets to us, so the bank, they'll send out what's called an RFP. It's a request for proposal. They'll probably send it out to 3-5 firms. We'll bid a fee and a turnaround time, and they'll take all of the bids and they'll submit it to the borrower and the loan officer, and they do it blindly. So they don't cherry pick who they want to pick for the appraiser. And so they base it on that, on the fee and the turnaround time. And once it gets awarded, if it comes to our firm, then it gets logged into our system, and then we get the process started. We start reaching out to either the broker, the landlord, whoever it is, the contact person is, to get the information that we need to get the appraisal done. We go inspect it. And that's just a basic guideline of how it works. And as far as our in-house, I'll complete the appraisal. It'll get reviewed in-house by one of our partners, quality control, that's what it is. And then we submit it to the bank, and sometimes we don't ever hear anything. Sometimes we get some questions back. So it just, it varies between lenders. So,
but that's typically it from start to finish as far as you're with the lender's concerned.
yes.
One of the takeaways from that for owners is that blind 3-4 bid process where it's a fee, but also a time. And a lot of times borrowers are they're obviously on a contract timeline. The lender is not on the same timeline.
Yeah.
But by paying a little extra, you can compress that appraisal timeline and shorten that lender process. So that's something that I've seen sophisticated buyers pay that extra, and it's typically not double or something, but you can compress that time frame by weeks.
Yep.
By going with a faster bid.
Yeah, we try to bid a quick turnaround time with one fee. Most appraisers I think would just do one bid, say this is going to be a $3,000 appraisal. It's going to take 3 weeks. But we offer them different options. This is the 2-week, and this is the price. This is the 3-week. This is the price. If time isn't an issue, then we'll go 4 weeks, and that's going to be the cheapest price. And so at least our office, that's what we try to offer our clients. So it gives them.
So when you get the RFQ from the lender, you actually respond back with 3 different options?
Most of the time, yeah. Like
wow.
It depends how busy we are. We try to always offer 2 weeks because, timing a lot of times can be the issue. It could be fee sensitive. Somebody just wants the cheapest fee. It could be timing issue. He might need to close in 10 days, and there might only be one firm in town that could do that. And so we try to offer them as many options as we can.
That is very helpful to know that's being, because typically when I see it as a 3 bids, it's just vendor, appraiser 1, 2, 3, 3 weeks, this much, 3 weeks, this much, 4 weeks, this much. I didn't realize that was even within that typically you could pick number 1 and get the shortest time frame. Because that in our world, like that difference in fee is typically small compared to the risk the buyer is taking on the contract on his deposit.
Oh yeah, right? Especially if he's about to go hard on the deposit. He doesn't have a whole lot of options, and it's not as a big of an issue now because a lot of the firms have slowed down. A year and a half ago, everyone was just so busy. You'd be lucky to get it done in 3 weeks. So
it is part of the ebbs and flows of the market and seasonality. So you're exactly, just because 6 months ago when you did a deal, took this long for everyone, doesn't mean today. It can change quickly.
Yeah, and the pricing's dynamic based on our workflow. Starting off the year, we're a little bit slow, but it's picked back up, and hopefully it gets better. I think interest rates are starting to stabilize a little bit, so people are getting used to not the 3% interest rates anymore, but 6%, whatever the number is. But that's becoming more the norm now. So,
would you roll through the basics of the appraisal? What an appraisal, what it is, and especially income approach, comps, replacement, and how then you weigh those values.
Yeah, so there's 3 approaches to value. There's the cost approach, the sales comparison approach, and the income approach. The cost approach is just basically your replacement cost new plus your land value plus profit, and that tells you basically at what value that project is feasible. The sales comparison approach is simply just 3, 4, 5 sales. You make adjustments to those sales. You get to a unit value. Say it's $200,000 a unit. Apply that times whatever units you have, and that's your value. And then the income approach can be broken down into 2 parts. There's a direct capitalization approach. It's just 1 year NOI, cap rate, divided into NOI, you get a value. And then there's a discounted cash flow analysis where you do a series of cash flows over either 5, 10, however long the holding period is. For an apartment, it's an income producing property. So the income approach is basically everything for that as far as the valuation goes. The sales comparison approach just kind of help support that number. And the cost approach, we don't generally do unless it's a proposed project. We try to avoid it if we can because it's a lot more work, to be honest with you. But yeah, the sales comparison to income approaches you'll always see in probably every appraisal, and the income approach is going to be the most heavily weighted.
Yeah. For the income approach, when you're reviewing that, typically you have the current income as it is today based on the current operator. And then you have, year one, assuming, you're pushing the rents to market and, tax reassessed. When you're looking at that income approach, how do you weight, or first of all, I guess, how would you underwrite each of them so you're coming to a correct NOI and feel confident? And then how do you weight those?
So you'll have two different values. You'll have the value as is, and that's going to be based on what your contract rents are. And then you'll have a property, say their contract rents are 75% of market, but they might be 100% physically occupied. They're just not economically stabilized. So there'll be a value, it's called a prospective value as stabilized, and that could be projected a year or two out once that new owner takes over and he brings rents to market. So that'll have a separate value based on market rents, and there'll be a spread between that number. A lot of deals that I've been seeing are just people buying these apartments where the contracts are way below market. They'll reposition it. They'll come in. They'll do some renovations. They'll put in some capital expenditures. They'll raise rents, and they might buy it at a going in cap rate of 3.5%. And then once they get everything done, it might be 8-9 cap. So, but yeah, they're in that case, there'll be two different values.
Yeah. And then for the sales comp approach, what is like, I assume you have a certain geography and you have like also weighting, like, because some assets are nicer than others.
Yeah.
What do you look for to know, hey, these are good comps, these are, hey, this one doesn't really apply?
I mean, ideally, the closest ones are going to be your best comps. For me, I look for something that's pretty similar as a number of units. Similar unit mix. If we have all one bedrooms, I'd like a project that's all one bedrooms, but we don't always get that. So we got to make adjustments. That unit size is a big factor. And it depends on, Class C project, amenities isn't a big deal. If it has a pool, great. If it doesn't have a pool, they're probably not going to care too much. If it's a Class A project, you got to have the best amenities. You got to have trash pickup. You've got to have a pool. You've got to have park. You got to have, gated entry, that type of stuff. So it depends on the class of the property. But ideally, the ones that are closest are probably going to be your best comps. And then I kind of look at the physical attributes of the property, age that it was built. If one was built in the 70s and it was renovated 2015, it's probably in decent condition. I don't want to use a comp that was built in the 70s and then just no one's taking care of it. That would completely undervalue that property. So that's something else I would take into consideration.
For multifamily owners or a buyer, let's say you have a buyer, lender's got the appraisal order, the buyer's there, and what can they do to help you as an appraiser?
The owner itself?
Either both the owner, the seller, and the buyer, both of them, in the process, because they're going to have some contact with you and they can make your life a pain by not providing information, or they can make it easy by actually having stuff.
I think the easiest ones are ones that have all of their financial organized, where I can just kind of I can kind of sort through it real quick. I can look at taxes, insurance, repairs, maintenance, utilities, just kind of break it out, as opposed to someone just giving me just a bunch of paperwork and saying, hey, you go figure this thing out. And that happens. And then I get the opposite end of the spectrum, where I get a really nice financial memorandum and it has everything put in there for me. It has their pro forma. That makes my job 10 times easier, as opposed to trying to figure this thing out. And when it's not organized, then I have to come back and I've got questions, because one year their repairs and maintenance might be $20,000, the next year might be $50,000, and I have to explain that in the report. And it could just be simply like, okay, there was a hurricane and we had $30,000 in repairs and maintenance expense, but that's not going to happen every year, so we need to not underwrite that. So things like that, just keeping everything organized is probably the most important thing, I would say.
And you work obviously with a ton of brokers. What is the best practices that you've seen from brokers do to help you do your job?
Brokers just facilitate the sale for the most part. I feel like all the brokers that I've worked with have always been very good at their job, setting up the inspections and just getting the questions I have answered. I think some owners don't want to get involved and they just kind of push everything to the broker, and that's fine. And sometimes it's easier that way for me, because the broker speaks the same language as appraisers for the most part. Some owners don't, I might ask them a question, they don't know the answer. So, going back, what can brokers do to help appraisers? If that, I think brokers are pretty knowledgeable of the market. If you know of some comps, share them with the appraiser. The more comps that we have to go through, the better. And generally, I don't think there's a ton of multifamily brokers in Orlando. So, you guys are really keyed in on all the sales that are out there. You know them pretty well, or you've talked to someone that knows it. So, sharing that information with us kind of expedites the process for us. So I think that the most time-consuming part of the appraisal is finding the comps and then verifying all that information to make sure that it's accurate. So if we have someone that can at least not do the work for us, but kind of help facilitate that, it makes it go a lot faster.
Yes, you are correct. Being on top of market data is a process that we have staff to help with that exact thing, because it is a time-consuming process and it's incredibly valuable.
And it's always changing. I mean, the sales get dated pretty quick, so you always have to be, I read the Orlando Business Journal, I read the Growth Spotter, I read all these different things to kind of keep up with everything. So, and that's what you have to do. If you get behind, you get a little bit complacent, then the market 6 months ago is a lot different than it was today. So
when you're doing appraisal and you're going through the review process with a lender, because I know sometimes you give it to them and then that's it. But other times the lender, but no matter what, the lender does have some review process.
Yep.
What does that typically look like on their side? They've gotten the appraisal, it's finished, you hand it over to them.
Yeah, there's a lot of different scenarios that can happen. We submit the appraisal to the bank, and the bank either has their own in-house reviewer who works for the bank and reviews their appraisals, and he'll either accept it or he'll come back and ask questions or want revisions, corrections, whatever it is. We'll send that back, and then that'll be accepted once we do that, or he could just flat out reject the appraisal. I don't think that happens very often. It doesn't happen very often, at least at our office. I don't know about the other offices, but I think we're pretty good at responding to the banks when they do have questions. And so the other thing that could happen is they can send it out to a third-party reviewer. It could be someone like myself that just that knows the appraisal pretty well. So I'll review it. and I'll write a report basically summarizing the quality of the work and whether I want to accept it or reject it. And the bank relies on that. And then there's these appraisal management companies, they're called AMCs, who kind of do a lot of the logistics for the banks. So they have the contacts with the appraisers, they order the appraisals, and they'll review the appraisals. So they're a little bit more difficult to work with sometimes. I don't know their processes too much, but a lot of times the banks just order it directly from us. So that's kind of the first two scenarios are what we run into a lot of times.
Yeah, I have run into the third party much more in the last few years than I did previously. I almost never did, and it seems like now I've seen it a number of times with a third party
Yeah,
reviewer.
yeah, I ran into that with you recently. I think Johnny had a job or a contract out in, what was that, Titusville or Rockledge. AMC came back and said, well, what kind of heat do they have? And it's like, well, this is Florida. we don't we don't look at heat too much, but these are the things
They
that
open their windows.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like these are the questions they ask sometimes, and we have to answer them or do the best we can. So
We've done recently a number of pretty deep value add deals where there's a big gap between contract rents and the pro forma and what needs to be done, obviously, with the physical asset. When you're doing the appraisal for that kind of property, what's your thought process and what you look at and weight in that kind of scenario?
So with apartments, the leases are short term, they're 12 months or less. So they don't encumber the property for very long. So in a case like that, how I would approach it is I would first come up with a value as stabilized as though everything is at market. And then I would look at what kind of rent loss they're going to see to get to that point. And that could be simply just looking at the rent roll, looking at the expiration dates of all the leases, and figuring out what the rent loss is between market rent and contract rent and how much time they have left on their lease. And doing that, there's going to be tenants that are going to move out. So you have to kind of estimate a retention rate. Fortunately, Orlando, the multifamily market's been very hot. So you can have a tenant move out and you can have someone move in the next day. That's just the way it's been. So I don't think getting someone to market is a very difficult thing right now, at least in Orlando. And then so going back to what I was saying was I would get to the value of as though everything was at market, and then I would estimate that rent loss between what it's going to take them to roll those leases to market, and that'll be my rent loss. And I'm going to deduct that from that value at stabilized. And then generally you're going to add in a little bit of profit because no one's going to want to go through that task of getting everything to market without any kind of profit. I mean, you invest $5 million, you want some kind of return on that for your time, money, or capital and effort to get it there. So,
Drew, there's been really good insights. Do you have any questions that you think I should have asked or you feel would be helpful for the audience?
I think some brokers that I know, they're like, well, why is the appraiser calling me wanting to know what the cap rate was on this sale? And because you probably get those phone calls all the time, but some brokers don't understand that. And it's just us doing our due diligence. A sale, an apartment sale really isn't worth a whole lot unless you know the economics of the sale. Whether you need to know what the cap rate was, what the occupancy was. And there could be multiple cap rates in a sale. It could be the in-place rents, there could be the pro forma. So we need to understand those things, whether that cap rate had a tax adjustment, whether reserves were included in it. So the more information we have on the sale, the better we can analyze it, and the better, the more credible the number that we come up with is. So, again, I can pull 4 sales and they're all say $200,000 a unit. Great, but what if one of them was 50% occupied and had $300,000 in deferred maintenance? Those are the answers we're trying to get to. So yeah, that's all I have for that.
It is amazing. I've talked to a number of appraisers who have been incredibly happy having conversations with me. And they're
Hmm.
like, wow, thank you so much for sending this. Other brokers don't even return my phone calls. And that
Yeah.
honestly amazes me. That is an absolute rookie move on the part of a
Well, you're one
brokerage.
of the best at that
Like
because
it amazes me. It's like
yeah.
you're going to be working with these people this year, next year, some point. Like, wouldn't you want to be helpful versus the dude when they see you? That's like, oh, that guy.
Yeah. Well, and it's 5 minutes every time on the phone.
Yeah, dude. Here,
Doesn't
forward to
take
OM,
long.
answer 2 questions.
Yeah.
It's
But
a low investment to have a good relationship later on.
it's the nature of the business. I've learned to not take it personal because there are brokers that they just won't share the information or whatever it is. So it is what it is. I appreciate brokers like you because you always call me back. You always give me your insight. Sometimes I'm working on a deal. I'm like, well, I don't know if this is a 6 cap or a 7 cap, and I'll call you up and get your input. And that really helps put it to make me feel comfortable with the numbers. So
Any closing thoughts or major takeaways you'd like the audience to have?
um, just keep moving your rents to market as much as you can. Know your market as much as you can. The more you're on top of that, the better you can manage your property. Don't let maintenance get behind. Just the things that we talked about to maximize value. At the end of the day, the NOI is what's going to drive the value. And the higher you can get your NOI, the higher the value the property is. And yeah, so.
Awesome. Drew, thank you so much for taking time to get on here and talk to us. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.